Hey, what's up? It's your boy Rawk. After I talked about the best games released for every single one of Nintendo's major consoles and not the Virtual Boy, I was tasked with pulling an opposite day and talking about the worst. And because of that, I've contracted something. It's a bitch. I just don't understand how games can be so terrible. I'm not one to pretend like I'm better than any game devs out there, but if I was making Chibi Robo Ziplash, I think I'd notice that this was the biggest heap of horse shit ever conceived by man before I thought, I should release this. No! You shouldn't! Video games are great, right? They take forever to release, cost way too much, and a lot of them just straight up blow. Yes, I've already talked about the best game on all of Nintendo's systems, but I think it's about time we do the deed with the 99%. Now, when I looked at the best games, I excluded all the games that Nintendo didn't deem to be publishing worthy. But this time around, we're throwing this rule down the toilet where all of these games belong. Nintendo games generally don't tend to score too awfully low, even if they are abysmal. Sure, every party has a Star Fox Zero, but for the most part, this means more shit for me to sieve through. Fun. There's no point in putting it off any longer. It's time to take a walk on the appalling side of life. Only God knows if I'll make it through this in one piece. I'm barely acquainted with the good side of the NES library, so you know for a fact I haven't played the shit ones. So let's turn to the internet, where there's one contender that sticks out the most, namely being Deadly Towers. I have no idea what this game is, but I'm more than happy to consider it shit. On the Nintendo published side of things, Mario is missing, sure, why not? The first ever Luigi game, and the first ever Nintendo game that was shit. It was nothing more than an educational romp of tedium that loosely culminated in Luigi saving Mario, with the fun twist of being garbage. The idea of Luigi saving Mario had potential, and would later be fully realized in Luigi's Mansion, but not in Mario's Missing, that's for sure. I know there's probably worse games on the NES than these two, but that's not gonna stop me from saying these are the worst games on the console, because what else would I do? Play video games? God, no. This is a tough one. Looking online, I haven't really been able to find any definitive answer on what the worst Game Boy game of all time is. There was like one person who said Castilian. So sure, and then all of the lists talking about the worst Nintendo published games on the platform have Wario Land or Metroid 2 at the #1 spot, which somehow doesn't seem right to me. I'm gonna go with Castilian here because I legitimately don't know what other game could take the spot from it, and Jesus Christ, not having the help of Metacritic for these earlier consoles is a nightmare. The SNES is generally lauded as having the best library of games of all time, so dear God, please tell me why most of it is wretched. Much like with the NES, I'm not all too familiar with the abysmal side of this library, but looking online it would seem that race driving is the worst SNES game of all time. Now, I haven't played this game at all, but taking a peek at some gameplay, yeah, this isn't surprising. This game looks barely functional. They seem to put all of their effort into the driving UI, the steering wheel, this guy's hands, the speedometer and whatnot, but they spend so much time and money doing that they forgot to make the rest of the game. On the Nintendo published side of things, well, would you look at that? Yes, Mario is Missing is one of those elusive cross-generation games. It came out on the SNES and its predecessor around the same time, but I guarantee you the NES version is the lesser of the two because, you know, it's the NES version. But the SNES version is still worth mentioning. I'm not gonna say that it's the worst on the console because this game has already been given that award once, but again, it's a necessity when talking about 16-bit manure. For the Nintendo 64? Did you really expect it to be anything else? This game is not very well loved. Many people will claim that this is the worst game of all time, so it only makes sense for it to take the cake in terms of the N64. For Nintendo published stuff? Hey You Pikachu? This thing was terrible! So terrible, in fact, that when Nintendo tried to release it in PAL regions, we just told them to go fuck themselves. You just talk to Pikachu and he'd listen to your instructions once in a blue moon. The microphone simply didn't work well. Pikachu was only coded to respond to a certain list of commands, but even when you used those commands, 90% of the time, the game says, no you didn't. The only other Nintendo published game that comes close to this is Yoshi's Story, and that is criminal! This game is really good, and I wouldn't dare put it near the bottom of the list. What else we got? Dr. Mario 64? Yeah, Nintendo didn't publish a great deal on this system. The worst GBA game is Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and how dare a game with that name score a measly 21 on Metacritic. This game is basically a mediocre fighting game based on some kid's toy, but I gotta be honest, it doesn't look terrible. Looking at gameplay, it looks alright as a kid's game. The main issue I have with it is it doesn't seem to have all too much content, and it looks like it would get repetitive and boring quick. But for a quick little time killer for kids who are fans of the toys, I don't think this should be the worst on the console. But I mean, what am I gonna do about it? And for Nintendo published stuff, I couldn't really find anything all too conclusive. Oh no, one guy didn't like Mario Kart Super Circuit. Well, fuck you, Metacritic can't get enough of that game. Charlie's Angels! Sure! This game was exclusive to the GameCube, joy oh joy. From what I can tell, it's basically Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball meets a generic 3D beat-em-up. And apparently it ties into the movie somehow, but I'm not going to exude the energy into finding out how, considering I checked out of this one while we were still talking about Rock'em Sock'em Robots. The game doesn't look unplayable, it just looks mind-numbingly boring, which is arguably worse. With broken or bugged games, there's a chance you can get a kick out of all the glitches that can be found, but with boring games, there's no fun whatsoever to be found here. They just make you want to play something else. So let's play something else. Geist is the lowest rated Nintendo published game from what I can tell. Now, is that deserved? I don't know. The game doesn't look awful, and to be honest, the score doesn't even really suggest that it is. But compared to the other Nintendo published GameCube games, yeah, this thing looks a little bit stinky. However, the title of worst GameCube game absolutely belongs to Charlie's Angels. No question. Get this fucking thing out of my face right now. Elf Bowling 1 and 2. Next. Not only is this the lowest rated DS game, but the 4th lowest rated game of all time. I don't even want to give this thing the time of day, and I also don't want to bother looking up the worst Nintendo published DS game because compared to this fucking thing, they'd be masterpieces. The 4 worst Wii games are all WiiWare titles, digital games found exclusively on the Wii Shop channel, so let's go download some of them. I'm gonna play 101 in 1 Explosive Megamix now! Well, we're gonna have to move on to physical games, of which Balls of Fury is the lowest rated. Now, I have no doubt that this game is dreadful, but I don't care, because I believe the worst Wii games of all time are the 2 that follow Balls of Fury. Data design is fucking garbage. They've made 2 games in their entire history and just reskinned and re-released them as many times as they could. Anubis 2 and Ninja Breadman are both 1 point higher than Balls of Fury. And these are the exact same game with different textures. And because they're both the same, that means they're both dog shit. These games are horrible. And even though there are lower rated games on the Wii, they are absolutely deserving of the bottom spot. I'm really not picky about which data design game should take the cake. But Ninja Breadman at least has a funny name, so just because of that, I'll go with Anubis 2. The lowest rated 3DS game is Tenkai Knight's Brave Battles, but who the hell cares when we can talk about Chibi Robo Ziplash? Oh, joy! Chibi Robo Photo Finder got a way lower score than Ziplash, and man, that's insulting. Sure, it wasn't the most deep thing in the world and capitalized on the whole 3DS camera trend years after it died out, but it was nowhere near as bad as Ziplash. This game is horrendous. It took Chibi Robo's legacy and just shit all over it. Are there objectively worse games on the 3DS? No. I mean, sure, some games are barely playable and riddled with bugs, but they aren't Chibi Robo Ziplash. If you couldn't tell, I want this game to go fuck itself. Which is exactly why I own it twice. Family Party 30 Great Games is the worst Wii U game, and it's so bad that Europe didn't want it. It's just a poorly made minigame collection, and is also the 2nd worst rated game of all time, my god. Actually, if we want to ignore digital games, it's the worst game of all time, which makes the fact that I can never own it weirdly upsetting. In terms of Nintendo published games, we have a lot of options here. Devil's Third was a nosebleed of a game that Nintendo almost seemed ashamed to publish. Mario Tennis Ultra Smash was a barren shell of a Mario Tennis game and nothing more. Mario and Sonic at the Sochi 2014 Winter Olympic Games suffered from Mario and Sonic fatigue and long-ass title syndrome. Pokemon Rumble U. Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival isn't that bad. I'm one of the only people alive who doesn't hate this game, but currently I can't play it because I don't feel like freeing an angry spirit, so I guess you'll just have to take my word for it. We're finally here, the last Nintendo console, and what better way to celebrate than with Ark Survival Evolved. The port of this game was absolutely botched. It was horrifying. The graphics and amount of pop-in were appalling, the abundance of glitches made me vomit, and the fact that this was a full-price game is revolting. There are games with lower ratings on Switch, and they're all digital, such as Vroom in the Night, a magical bike action game. Oh fuck, I'm in. The Switch is a bit of a tricky situation though, because, you know, know, it's still getting games. Chances are, games that are worse than Ark and Vroom will release before the end of its life. I mean, come on, if Balan Wonderworld can release after these games, then you can achieve anything. But as of 2021, these are the worst games on the platform, and it truly warms my heart to know that the Switch has so much shit. The reason for this is pretty damn obvious. Nintendo has basically given up on managing what releases on the eShop. Also, they can say, oh man, we have thousands of games. But they don't seem to realize that by doing this, most of the games on the console are horse shit. It's whatever though. At least the good games on the system make up for it. Actually, I don't know if they do. It's absolutely baffling to me that so many terrible games can be released on every single console. I get that people don't make bad games on purpose, but even still, how are there so many garbage games? But all of these bad games do have at least one thing going for them. They make for fantastic boomerangs.
Allow me to demonstrate. It couldn't even do that right!